Have you ever fallen in love with someone you shouldn't? Someone whose heart could completely shatter yours? This is a story about forbidden love, second chances, and the courage to defy everything society says is wrong. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're ready for an emotional roller coaster that will leave you questioning everything about love and age, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The rain hammered against the windshield as Michael Harper's BMW wound through the narrow mountain roads of the Adirondacks. Each drop felt like another reminder of the tears he could no longer shed. 3 months of numbness had left him hollow, a shell of the man who once believed in forever. At 42, Michael had built an empire in Chicago's architectural world, designing homes that held other people's dreams while his own lay buried with Sarah. The wedding ring still clung to his finger, a golden anchor to a life that no longer existed. "You need to get away from that office," Dave had insisted during their last phone call. "Come to the lake house. Emma's graduating from Yale next week, but after that, it'll just be us. Like old times." Michael gripped the steering wheel tighter. Dave Martinez had been his closest friend since their Cornell days. 20 years of shared dreams, late-night conversations, and unwavering loyalty. If anyone could pull him from this abyss, it was Dave. The lake house emerged through the mist like something out of a dream. Rustic cedar beams and floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the dark water beyond. Michael remembered helping Dave design this sanctuary 5 years ago, back when life still made sense. Dave appeared on the porch before Michael even turned off the engine. Shorter and stockier than Michael's lean frame, his weathered face carried lines of concern that hadn't been there during happier times. "You look like hell," Dave said, pulling Michael into a fierce embrace. "Feel worse," Michael admitted, his voice cracking for the first time in weeks. Inside, the house smelled of pine and coffee. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, Dave with his ex-wife Linda, a young Emma at various stages of childhood and graduation pictures. Michael avoided looking too closely. Other people's happiness felt like salt in an open wound. "How are you really doing?" Dave asked, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. Michael stared into the amber liquid. "Sarah wanted children. We tried for years. The doctor said—" He took a shaky breath. "The irony is she died on her way to another fertility appointment. Some teenager texting while driving." Dave's hand found Michael's shoulder. "She wouldn't want you destroying yourself like this." "Everyone keeps telling me what Sarah would want," Michael said, his voice turning bitter. "But Sarah's gone, Dave. She's gone. And I'm supposed to just what? Move on? Find someone new?" He shook his head. "The thought makes me sick." They sat in silence, watching the lake's surface ripple in the fading light. 20 years of friendship needed no words to fill the space between them. "Emma's coming home tomorrow," Dave said eventually. "Fair warning, she's not the little girl you remember." Michael managed a weak smile. "Still planning to take over the world of sustainable architecture?" More determined than ever. "Yale shaped her well. But she's got something special, Michael. Something that reminds me of us at that age. That hunger to create something meaningful." As thunder rolled across the mountains, Michael wondered if he'd ever feel hungry for anything again. The morning sun painted the lake in shades of gold when Emma Martinez stepped out of her Honda Civic. Michael, nursing his second cup of coffee on the deck, nearly dropped the mug. The gangly 16-year-old with braces and wild curls had vanished. In her place stood a woman of 22, her dark hair now tamed into elegant waves that caught the sunlight. She wore a simple sundress that highlighted curves Michael definitely shouldn't be noticing, and when she smiled at her father, it was with the confidence of someone who'd found her place in the world. "Dad!" Emma's voice carried across the water as she ran toward the deck. Dave caught her in a spinning hug that made them both laugh. "Look at you," he said proudly. "Yale graduate. I'm so proud. Summa cum laude in sustainable architecture," Emma announced. Then her gaze found Michael. Her brown eyes, once bright with teenage innocence, now held depths he hadn't expected. "Michael? Dad told me you were here. I'm so sorry about Sarah." She approached with careful grace, and when she hugged him, Michael felt something shift inside his chest. A flutter of what? Attraction? Impossible. This was Emma, Dave's little girl. "Thank you," he managed, stepping back, perhaps too quickly. "Congratulations on graduation. Your father's been bragging about your achievements for months." Emma laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "He exaggerates. But I am excited about what's next. I have so many ideas about integrating renewable energy into residential design. Emma, let the man finish his coffee before you start redesigning the world, Dave interrupted with fond exasperation. But Michael found himself intrigued. Actually, I'd like to hear about your ideas. The firm's been exploring sustainable options for our Lincoln Park projects. Emma's eyes lit up. Really? I've been studying biomimetic design principles that could revolutionize how we think about urban housing. Nature's been solving efficiency problems for millions of years. We just need to pay attention. As she launched into an animated discussion about solar collection and natural ventilation systems, Michael realized he was seeing Emma, truly seeing her for the first time. Her passion reminded him of his younger self, back when architecture was about changing the world, not just paying bills. You should come work for me, he said suddenly, surprising himself. The words hung in the air. Dave raised an eyebrow and Emma blinked in shock. What? An internship? You could learn the practical side of residential design while bringing fresh perspectives to our team, Michael said, his mind racing. That is, if you're interested in Chicago. Emma's face transformed with excitement. Are you serious? I've followed your work since high school. The Morrison house you designed won 3 sustainability awards. You know my work? Michael asked. Know it. I wrote my senior thesis on your integration of passive solar design in urban environments. Emma's cheeks flushed pink. I may have had a bit of a professional crush on your architectural philosophy. Dave laughed. Professional crush? That's a new one. But Michael barely heard him. He was watching Emma's animated expressions, the way her hands moved as she spoke, the intelligence that sparkled in her eyes. Something was waking up inside him, something that had been dormant since Sarah's death. When could you start? He asked. 2 weeks later, Emma stood before the glass towers of downtown Chicago, her heart hammering with nervous excitement. The Harper and Associates building rose 30 stories into the summer sky, its sleek facade reflecting the bustling energy of Michigan Avenue. She'd spent the previous days in a whirlwind of preparation, apartment hunting in Lincoln Park, shopping for professional clothes, researching every project Michael's firm had completed in the past 5 years. Her father had seemed both proud and oddly protective when he'd driven her to the train station. Remember, Emma, Dave had said, gripping her hands as the train approached. Michael's been through hell. He's not himself right now. Be patient with him. Of course, Dad, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. But Dave's expression had remained troubled. Just be careful. Sometimes grief makes people unpredictable. Now standing in the marble lobby, Emma wondered what he'd meant. The Michael she remembered from her childhood had been warm, funny, endlessly kind. The man she'd met at the lake house seemed shadowed by loss, but still fundamentally decent. The elevator whisked her to the 28th floor, where glass walls revealed a bustling open workspace filled with drafting tables, computer stations, and architectural models. Young designers hunched over blueprints while senior staff gestured animatedly over scale models of residential complexes. Emma Martinez? A woman in her 30s asked, approaching with a welcoming smile. I'm Rachel Chen, Michael's project manager. He's waiting for you in his office. Rachel led her through the maze of workstations to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Grant Park. Michael stood silhouetted against the cityscape, his broad shoulders outlined by the late morning sun. When he turned, Emma felt that same strange flutter she'd experienced at the lake house. Emma, welcome to Chicago. His smile seemed more genuine than it had 2 weeks ago. Ready to see what we're working on? For the next hour, Michael guided her through the firm's current projects, a mixed-use development in River North, renovations in the historic district, and most intriguingly, a series of eco-friendly townhouses in Lincoln Park that aligned perfectly with her interests. The challenge, Michael explained, spreading blueprints across his desk, is balancing sustainability with the neighborhood's historic character. The Planning Commission is particular about aesthetic compliance. Emma studied the plans, her mind racing. What if we approached it differently? Instead of hiding the sustainable elements, we could make them part of the architectural language. Green roofs that echo the neighborhood's garden tradition. Solar panels integrated into decorative metalwork. Michael leaned closer to see what she was sketching. The scent of his cologne, something cedar and clean, made her suddenly aware of his proximity. Show me, he said. Emma's pencil flew across the paper, her ideas tumbling out in quick strokes and notations. She felt Michael watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm, but she pressed on, lost in the creative flow. "This is brilliant," Michael said quietly when she finished. "You've solved problems my team has been wrestling with for months." Their eyes met across the desk, and Emma felt something electric pass between them. For a moment, the professional atmosphere dissolved, leaving just a man and a woman discovering an unexpected connection. "I should introduce you to the team," Michael said abruptly, stepping back. But as he led her through the office, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted between them, something that had nothing to do with architecture. 3 weeks into her internship, Emma had found her rhythm. Her desk sat near the window, surrounded by the controlled chaos of an active project. Color samples, material catalogs, and multiple versions of the Lincoln Park townhouse plans covered every surface. The other interns treated her with friendly respect, and the senior staff had begun seeking her input on design challenges. Emma felt herself blooming in the collaborative environment, her ideas taking physical shape in ways Yale had never quite achieved. But it was her growing awareness of Michael that kept her distracted during long afternoon meetings. She'd begun to notice small things. How he rubbed his temples when frustrated, the way his voice deepened when he was passionate about a concept, the unconscious grace with which he moved through the office. Sometimes she caught herself staring at his hands as he gestured over blueprints, wondering what they might feel like. "Earth to Emma," called James, another intern, breaking her reverie. "Did you hear Rachel's question about the facade materials?" Emma flushed, realizing she'd been watching Michael through his office's glass wall instead of paying attention to the team meeting. "Sorry, could you repeat that?" Rachel Chen smiled knowingly. "I was asking about your thoughts on incorporating reclaimed brick into the street-facing elevation." "Right. Yes." Emma forced herself to focus, but not before noticing Michael glance up from his desk, his eyes finding hers through the glass. The eye contact lasted only seconds, but it left her feeling breathless. That evening, Emma stayed late to finish rendering her latest design concepts. The office had emptied except for the cleaning crew, and she assumed she was alone. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows as she fine-tuned the digital model on her computer screen. "Working late?" Emma spun to find Michael standing behind her desk, his jacket off and sleeves rolled up. In the building's after-hours lighting, he looked younger, more approachable. "I wanted to finish the energy efficiency calculations for tomorrow's presentation," she said, trying to ignore how her pulse had quickened. "I think I've found a way to exceed LEED Platinum standards while staying within budget." Michael moved closer to see her screen, close enough that Emma could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Walk me through it." As Emma explained her innovations, she became acutely aware of Michael's attention, not just his professional interest, but something more personal. The way his eyes lingered on her face when she spoke. How he leaned unconsciously closer as her enthusiasm grew. "You're remarkable," he said quietly when she finished. "I've never seen anyone grasp complex systems integration this quickly." "My professors at Yale always said," Emma began, then stopped. Michael was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between admiration and something deeper. "Emma," he said, his voice lower, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest." Her heart hammered. "Okay. Why did you really want to work here? With all your talent, you could have interned anywhere. Why Chicago? Why my firm?" Emma bit her lower lip, a gesture she'd had since childhood when nervous. The truth was complicated, part professional admiration, part the way he'd made her feel seen and valued at the lake house, part the confusing feelings that had been growing stronger each day. "Because," she said finally, "you design buildings that matter, not just spaces for people to exist in, but places that enhance how they live. And because," she took a breath, "because you make me want to be better than I thought I could be." The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken tension. Michael's hand moved as if to touch her face, then stopped, falling back to his side. "I should go," he said abruptly. "You should too. It's late." But neither of them moved. Emma stood frozen, every nerve ending aware of Michael's proximity, of the way the lamplight caught the silver threading through his dark hair, of how vulnerable he looked without his usual professional armor. "Michael," she whispered. "Don't," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. We can't." Thunder rumbled outside, and the first drops of rain began striking the windows, as if nature itself conspired to trap them in this moment of possibility and danger. The downpour transformed Chicago's streets into rivers of reflected neon. What had begun as a typical summer storm had escalated into something fierce and unrelenting, trapping Emma and Michael on the 28th floor as the building's security system locked down. "Looks like we're stuck," Michael said, checking his phone. "Security won't let anyone leave until this passes, something about safety protocols and lightning strikes." Emma nodded, trying to ignore how the intimate lighting of the nearly empty office transformed their professional relationship into something far more personal. They were alone, truly alone, for the first time since her arrival in Chicago. "Are you hungry?" Michael asked. "There's a break room with decent coffee and whatever the interns haven't pillaged from the snack supply." They found themselves in the small kitchen area, sharing stale pastries and brewing coffee while rain lashed the windows. The casual setting stripped away the formal distance they'd maintained, leaving them as simply Michael and Emma, two people discovering an unexpected connection. "Tell me about Sarah," Emma said suddenly, then immediately regretted the words. "I'm sorry, No, it's okay." Michael set down his coffee cup, considering. "Everyone acts like mentioning her name will break me, but talking about her, it helps sometimes." Emma waited, giving him space to find his words. "We met in graduate school. She was studying landscape architecture while I focused on residential design. She had this theory that buildings and gardens should be partners, not just neighbors." Michael's smile was soft with memory. She'd spend hours explaining how the right plantings could reduce energy costs, improve air quality, create microclimates. "She sounds brilliant." She was, and patient. God, she was patient with me. Michael's expression darkened. "Especially during the years we tried to have children. Test after test, procedure after procedure. I started working longer hours to avoid the disappointment at home." She never complained, just kept believing things would work out. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "Michael!" "The morning she died, we'd had our first real fight in months. I'd suggested we take a break from trying, maybe focus on other things for a while. She said I was giving up on our dreams." His voice cracked. "The last thing I said to her was that maybe some dreams weren't meant to come true." The rain drummed against the windows as Emma struggled with an overwhelming urge to comfort him. Without thinking, she reached across the small table and covered his hand with hers. The contact sent electricity through both of them. Michael stared down at their joined hands, his breathing shallow. "I shouldn't be telling you this," he said. "You're Dave's daughter. You're 22 years old. You're my intern. I'm also someone who cares about you," Emma said softly. "And I'm not a child, Michael." He looked up then, really looked at her, and Emma saw the exact moment his carefully maintained professional distance crumbled. His eyes traveled from her face to their joined hands and back again. "Emma, what are we doing?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know that every time you look at me, I feel more alive than I ever have. And I know that's wrong on about 10 different levels, but I can't seem to stop feeling it." Michael pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. "This is insane. You're Dave's daughter. He's my best friend. I'm old enough to be... I have 20 years on you, Emma. You're supposed to be dating guys your own age, not mourning widowers with more baggage than an airport terminal." Emma stood too, her chin lifting with determination. "Don't you think I get to decide what I want? Who I care about? You don't understand what you're saying." "Don't patronize me!" Emma's voice rose with frustration. "I may be young, but I'm not stupid. I know this is complicated. I know it would hurt my father. I know you're grieving. But I also know what I feel when I'm around you. And it's not going away." They faced each other across the small room, both breathing hard. The storm outside seemed to echo the tempest building between them. "What do you feel?" Michael asked quietly. Emma's courage nearly failed her, but she pressed on. Safe, challenged, inspired, and something else. Something I've never felt before. "Emma." "I've never been in love before, Michael. I spent college focused on my studies, on building a career. But being here with you, it's like I'm finally understanding what all those books and movies were trying to tell me." The admission hung between them like a live wire. Michael's face went through a dozen emotions: surprise, panic, and something that might have been hope. "You think you love me?" he whispered. "I know I do." The next moment happened in slow motion. Michael crossed the room in 3 quick strides, his hands framing Emma's face as he searched her eyes for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But when she rose on her toes and deepened the contact, Michael's control snapped. He kissed her with months of suppressed longing, with the desperation of a man who'd thought he'd never feel alive again. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. "This changes everything," Michael said against her forehead. "I know," Emma whispered. "Are you sorry?" Michael looked down at her upturned face, at the trust and love shining in her brown eyes, and felt something in his chest that had been frozen since Sarah's death finally begin to thaw. "Ask me tomorrow," he said, and kissed her again. The following weeks became a delicate dance of stolen moments and careful pretense. At the office, Emma and Michael maintained professional boundaries with almost theatrical precision. No lingering touches, no meaningful glances across conference rooms, no deviation from the mentor-intern dynamic everyone expected. But after hours, Chicago became their secret world. They met at small cafes in neighborhoods where no one knew them, walked hand in hand through Millennium Park after sunset, shared dinners at Emma's Lincoln Park apartment. Michael had forgotten what it felt like to anticipate someone's text message, to plan his day around stolen hours with another person. Emma's apartment reflected her perfectly. Plants on every surface, architectural books stacked beside novels, sustainable design mixed with comfortable furniture she'd collected from vintage shops. Michael felt more relaxed there than he had anywhere since Sarah's death. "I can't believe I'm eating takeout Chinese food sitting on your floor," Michael said one evening, using chopsticks to navigate Lumen while Emma spread architectural magazines around them like a picnic blanket. "My dining table's covered with project models," Emma laughed. "Besides, this is more fun. Look." She showed him an article about biomimetic facades. This firm in Amsterdam is using principles from birdwing structure to create self-ventilating buildings. Michael watched her animated explanation, marveling at how her enthusiasm could make even familiar concepts seem fresh and exciting. "You're going to revolutionize this industry, aren't you?" "Maybe. But first, I have to convince certain traditionalist senior partners that innovation doesn't mean abandoning everything that came before." "Ah, so I'm a traditionalist now?" Emma leaned across their impromptu picnic to kiss him softly. "You're perfect." That's the problem. But perfection, as they both knew, was complicated. During their third week of secret meetings, Michael's guilt became impossible to ignore. "I talked to Dave today," he said suddenly, setting down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. They were in Emma's living room, the Sunday morning sun streaming through her oversized windows. Emma had been reading while Michael worked on project proposals, a domestic scene that felt both completely natural and utterly impossible. "Oh." Emma tried to keep her voice casual, but Michael caught the tension. "He asked how you were adjusting to Chicago, whether you were making friends." "Dating anyone?" Michael ran his hands through his hair. "I lied to him, Emma. I looked my best friend in the eye and lied." Emma set down her book, watching his agitation with growing concern. "What did you tell him?" "That you were focused on work. That you seemed happy but hadn't mentioned anyone special." Michael stood, beginning to pace. "Do you have any idea how that felt?" 20 years of friendship, and I'm hiding the most important thing in my life right now." "Michael." "What are we doing, Emma, really? Where can this possibly go?" He stopped pacing to face her. "I'm 42 years old. I was married for 15 years to a woman I thought I'd spend my life with. You're 22, just starting your career with your whole life ahead of you." Emma rose from the couch, her own frustration building. "Why does everyone keep reducing me to my age? Yes, I'm 22. I'm also a Yale graduate with a brain and a heart and the ability to make my own decisions. But what about your decisions? What about dating people your own age, having experiences?" "What experiences?" Emma's voice rose. "Michael, I spent my teenage years studying while other kids were dating. I got to college and threw myself into academics while my classmates were exploring relationships. You want to know the truth? I've never even, beyond a few awkward kisses at parties, I've never..." She trailed off, her cheeks burning red. But Michael understood. "Emma," he said gently. "So don't talk to me about experiences I should be having," she continued, her voice stronger now. "You are my experience. You're the first person who's ever made me understand what love feels like. What it means to want someone so much it physically hurts when they're not around." Michael crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm sorry. I'm scared, Emma. Scared of hurting you. Scared of losing Dave. Scared of what people will think. Scared of loving me?" He looked down at her earnest face, at the vulnerability she'd just laid bare, and felt his resistance crumble. Terrified of loving you, because I do love you, Emma. I do love you more than I thought I could ever love anyone again. They held each other in the morning light, both knowing that love alone wouldn't solve their problems, but unable to imagine facing them apart. What do we do now? Emma whispered. I don't know, Michael admitted, but we'll figure it out. Together. Neither of them noticed the text message arriving on Michael's phone, or the concerned tone in Dave's voice when he left a voicemail saying he was planning a surprise visit to Chicago that weekend. Dave Martinez had always been a details person. It's what made him an excellent architect, and, unfortunately for Michael and Emma, an observant friend. He'd noticed the change in Michael's voice during their recent phone calls, a lightness that hadn't been there since Sarah's death, an energy that suggested healing. But he'd also noticed things that didn't quite add up. Emma's evasiveness when he asked about her social life, Michael's failure to mention any personal developments despite seeming dramatically improved. And now, standing in Michael's office at noon on a Friday, Dave felt his suspicions crystallizing into something much worse. Emma's at lunch, Rachel had informed him when he'd asked to see his daughter, but she should be back soon if you want to wait. Dave had decided to surprise both of them, driving down from the lake house on impulse. Now he sat in Michael's office, watching his best friend's nervousness with growing unease. You seem better, Dave observed. More like yourself. I'm getting there, Michael said carefully. Work's been fulfilling lately. And Emma, how's she working out? Brilliantly. She's exceeded every expectation. Michael's face lit up as he spoke about Emma's contributions, her innovative solutions, her natural talent. She's going to be an incredible architect, Dave. You should be proud. Dave was proud. But something in Michael's tone triggered his protective instincts. There was too much enthusiasm, too much personal investment in Emma's success. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Michael's face went carefully neutral. Of course. Is there something going on between you and Emma? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Michael opened his mouth to deny it, then closed it again, the lie dying on his lips. Dave, Jesus Christ. Dave stood abruptly, his face going white. Jesus Christ, Michael. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you haven't, that you're not. It's not what you think. What I think. Dave's voice rose, drawing heads to turn throughout the open office. What I think is that my best friend is having an affair with my daughter. It's not an affair, Dave. We're both single adults. She's 22 years old. She's my daughter. And you're supposed to be mourning your wife, not seducing. Stop. Michael's voice cut through Dave's anger like a blade. Don't you dare reduce what Emma and I have to something cheap and predatory. What you have? Dave stared at his friend in disbelief. How long has this been going on? Michael couldn't meet his eyes. A few weeks. A few weeks? Dave sank back into his chair. My God, Michael, what were you thinking? I was thinking that I'd found something I thought I'd lost forever. I was thinking that Emma is an incredible woman who makes me remember what it feels like to be alive. She's a child. No, Dave, she's not. She's brilliant and compassionate and brave enough to take risks for what she believes in. She's more mature than people twice her age. Dave stood again, his hands shaking with rage. How could you do this to me? 20 years of friendship and you betray me like this? I never meant for it to happen, Michael said quietly. But it did happen. It's happening. And you didn't think to tell me? To ask permission? To consider how this might affect our family? Ask permission? Michael's anger flared. Emma doesn't need your permission to choose who she cares about. Like hell she doesn't. She's my daughter, Michael. My only child. And you've manipulated her. I haven't manipulated anyone! Michael slammed his hand on the desk. Emma came to me. She told me how she felt. I tried to stay away, tried to maintain boundaries, but what? You couldn't resist the ego boost of a young woman's infatuation? The accusation hit Michael like a physical blow. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Dave's voice was raw. You're old enough to be her father, Michael. What do you think people are going to say when they find out? What's this going to do to her reputation? Her career? Michael's anger deflated as Dave's words hit their target. He had worried about exactly these things, had lost sleep over the implications for Emma's future. I love her, Dave. You love her? Dave's voice was bitter. What you love is feeling young again. What you love is having someone look at you like you hung the moon. But what happens when the novelty wears off? When Emma realizes she's missed out on normal relationships with people her own age? When you decide you want someone more mature? Before Michael could respond, the office door opened. Emma walked in, takeout bag in hand, her smile bright with anticipation at seeing her father. "Dad, what a surprise!" She stopped mid-sentence, taking in the tense atmosphere, the anger radiating between both men. "What's wrong?" Dave looked between his daughter and his former best friend, seeing the way Emma unconsciously stepped closer to Michael, the protective way Michael's posture shifted. "We're leaving," Dave said quietly. "Pack your things, Emma. We're going home." "What, Dad? I don't understand." "I know about you and Michael." Dave's voice was deadly calm. "I know about the relationship you've been hiding from me." Emma's face went pale, but her chin lifted defiantly. And it's over. Whatever this is, it's over. You're coming home with me. I'm not a child, Dad. You can't just... I can, and I will. You're my daughter, and I won't stand by and watch you ruin your life for some midlife crisis fantasy. Emma looked to Michael for support, but he stood frozen, Dave's accusations echoing in his mind. When he didn't immediately defend their relationship, something in Emma's eyes died. "I see," she said quietly. "Dad, can you give us a moment?" "Emma, please." Dave looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in his daughter's tone made him step outside, closing the door behind him. Emma turned to Michael, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Say something." "Emma, maybe your father's right. Maybe we moved too fast. Didn't think this through." "Don't," Emma's voice cracked. "Don't you dare backtrack now. Not after everything we've shared." "But he's right about some things, your reputation, your career, my reputation." "My career?" Emma laughed bitterly. "What about my heart, Michael? What about what I want?" Michael reached for her, but she stepped back. "Emma, please." "No, you know what? Maybe you're both right. Maybe I'm too young, too naive to understand what I'm getting into." She picked up her purse, her movements sharp with hurt. "Thank you for the internship, Mr. Harper. It's been educational." She walked out without looking back, leaving Michael standing alone in his office, watching through the glass walls as Dave led his daughter toward the elevators. Emma didn't turn around, but Michael could see the rigid set of her shoulders, the careful way she held herself to keep from breaking down. 20 minutes later, they were gone, and Michael was left with the wreckage of the most important relationships in his life. 10 days passed in a suffocating blanket of silence. Michael threw himself into work with the desperate intensity of a drowning man, staying at the office until security forced him to leave, then returning before dawn to lose himself in blueprints and building codes. The Lincoln Park project, Emma's project, sat untouched on his desk, her innovative solutions mocking him with their brilliance. Rachel Chen watched his self-destruction with growing concern. "Michael, you need to go home. When's the last time you actually slept?" "I'm fine," he insisted, but the dark circles under his eyes and the tremor in his hands suggested otherwise. Meanwhile, at the lake house, Emma's own devastation manifested in a different kind of numbness. She sat on the dock for hours, staring at the water, while Dave hovered nearby with the anxious attention of a man who'd won a Pyrrhic victory. "Sweetheart, you need to eat something," Dave pleaded, setting a sandwich beside her untouched coffee. Emma didn't respond. She'd barely spoken since their return, answering direct questions with... Emma spoke in monosyllables now, spending most of her time in solitary contemplation. Dave's initial righteous anger had gradually given way to guilt as he watched his daughter's obvious pain. He'd expected anger, arguments, teenage-style rebellion. Instead, he got this hollow-eyed stranger who moved through the house like a ghost. "Emma, talk to me, please." "What would you like me to say, Dad?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "That you were right? That I was naive and stupid and made a mistake?" "I never said you were stupid." "No, you just treated me like I was incapable of making my own decisions about my own life." Dave sat heavily beside her on the dock. "I was protecting you." "From what?" "From being happy. From finding love with someone who saw me as more than just a kid with potential. From getting hurt. From making choices that could destroy your reputation, your career." "My career?" Emma finally turned to look at him, and Dave was shocked by the pain in her eyes. "Dad, I just lost the best professional opportunity I've ever had. I walked away from the internship of a lifetime because you couldn't handle the fact that I'd fallen in love with someone you didn't approve of. With someone 20 years older than you. So what? Emma's composure finally cracked. So what if he's older? Michael is kind and brilliant, and he makes me feel like I can accomplish anything. He listened to my ideas, respected my opinions, believed in my potential. And yes, he's grieving and complicated and comes with baggage, but I loved him anyway. I loved him, Dad, and you destroyed it. Dave felt the first crack in his certainty. Emma, do you want to know the worst part? She continued, her voice trembling. He didn't even fight for me. When you confronted him, when you made him choose between your friendship and our relationship, he chose you. So congratulations, Dad. You saved me from the terrible fate of being loved by your best friend. She stood and walked back toward the house, leaving Dave alone with the growing realization that his protective instincts might have caused more harm than good. That evening, Dave found himself dialing Michael's number for the first time since the confrontation. The call went straight to voicemail. Michael, it's Dave. We need to talk. About Emma, about everything. Call me back. Michael never did. Meanwhile, Emma sat in her childhood bedroom staring at her phone and fighting the urge to call Michael herself. Pride warred with heartbreak. Anger battled with longing. She'd meant what she'd said about Michael not fighting for her, but she also understood the impossible position her father had put him in. The text messages started as apologies, deleted before sending. Then became please, also deleted. Finally, she settled on something simple. I'm sorry about how everything ended. I hope you're okay. She stared at the unsent message for an hour before finally deleting it too. 3 days later, Dave found Emma packing her bags. Where are you going? Back to Chicago. I'm going to find another internship. Finish what I started. Emma, wait. I'm done waiting, Dad. I'm done letting other people make decisions about my life. She zipped her suitcase with finality. I love you, but I won't let fear, yours or mine, keep me from building the life I want. Dave watched helplessly as his daughter prepared to leave again, realizing that his attempts to protect her had only driven her further away. What about Michael? Emma paused in her packing. What about him? You made it clear he had to choose between us, and he did. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, Dad. But even as she said it, Emma wasn't sure she believed it. The 10 days without Michael had felt like a lifetime, and she couldn't shake the hope that maybe, somehow, they could find their way back to each other. Little did she know, Michael was at that very moment booking a flight out of Chicago, a flight that would take him as far from temptation as possible. Michael's hand shook as he signed the partnership dissolution papers, officially transferring his shares in Harper & Associates to his business partner. The Seattle firm of Morrison Klein had offered him a lucrative position designing sustainable resorts in the Pacific Northwest, a chance to start over somewhere that held no memories of Emma. You sure about this? James Morrison asked, reviewing the documentation. Chicago's your home. Your whole life is there. Not anymore, Michael said quietly. He'd spent the past week methodically dismantling his life, subletting his apartment, forwarding his mail, arranging for his belongings to be shipped west. Anything to avoid the temptation of reaching out to Emma, of making a choice that would destroy his friendship with Dave forever. Rachel had protested his departure most vehemently. This is insane, Michael. You're running away from the first real happiness you've found since Sarah died. I'm doing what's right, he'd insisted. Emma deserves better than the complications I'd bring to her life. Don't you think Emma should decide what she deserves? But Michael had already made his choice. He'd booked a red-eye flight to Seattle, planning to leave Chicago before he could change his mind. He was finishing the last of his packing when the knock came at his door. Michael's heart leapt. For one wild moment, he imagined Emma standing in the hallway, ready to fight for what they'd shared. Instead, he found Dave. They stared at each other for a long moment, 20 years of friendship hanging in the balance. Can I come in? Dave asked. Michael stepped aside, noting how haggard his former best friend looked. If you're here to gloat, I'm here because I made a mistake, Dave interrupted, his voice heavy with regret. Maybe the biggest mistake of my life. Michael continued packing, not trusting himself to respond. Emma's leaving for Chicago tomorrow, Dave said quietly. She's determined to find another internship to finish what she started here. Dave sank heavily onto Michael's couch. She hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. Won't even look at me. Good for her. Michael, stop packing and look at me. Michael reluctantly complied, and Dave was shocked by his appearance. Michael had lost weight. His face was gaunt, and his eyes held the same hollow look that had marked the months after Sarah's death. "Jesus, you look like hell." "Thanks." "Very supportive," Michael muttered. Dave leaned forward, his voice urgent. "I've been thinking about what happened in your office, about what I said to Emma. I was wrong, Michael. Not about everything, but about the important things." Michael's hand stilled on his suitcase. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that in 20 years of friendship, I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at Emma that day. Not even Sarah, and I know how much you loved her." The admission hung between them like a fragile bridge neither was sure they could cross. "And Emma," Dave continued quietly. "Emma's been different since she got home. Not just heartbroken, the way I expected, but devastated, like something essential has been torn away from her." Michael sank into a chair, exhausted by weeks of suppressed emotion. "Dave, what do you want from me?" "I want you to tell me the truth." "Do you love my daughter?" The question Michael had been avoiding, even with himself, demanded an honest answer. "Yes," he said quietly. "More than I thought I could love anyone again. More than I have any right to." "And she loves you," Dave said softly. "She told me she did. Before I made it clear that loving you was a betrayal of family loyalty." Dave flinched, guilt flashing across his face. "I was scared, Michael. Scared of losing her to someone I couldn't compete with. Scared of watching her make choices that might hurt her later." "So, you heard her first?" Dave nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I did." He stood and paced to the window. "She asked me something before she started packing. She asked if I'd rather have her safe and miserable or taking risks and living fully. And I realized I'd been so focused on protecting her from potential pain that I'd guaranteed her actual pain." Michael watched his friend's internal struggle with a mixture of hope and weariness. "What are you saying, Dave?" Dave turned from the window, his decision made. "I'm saying that if you love Emma and she loves you, then maybe the 20-year age difference isn't the most important thing. Maybe what matters is that you make each other better people." He hesitated, voice thick. "And our friendship? We'll survive if we both put Emma's happiness first." Dave's smile was sad but genuine. "She's right, you know. She's not a child anymore. She's a brilliant, strong woman who deserves to make her own choices about love and life." Michael felt something deep inside him, something that had been frozen solid, begin to crack open in his chest. "Dave, go to her, Michael, before she finds someone else to validate her worth. Before you both spend the rest of your lives wondering, what if?" Michael's voice was quiet, uncertain. "What if she won't see me? What if she's moved on?" Dave gave a dry, hollow laugh. "Trust me, she hasn't moved on, and neither have you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be running 3,000 miles away just to avoid dealing with your feelings." Michael looked around his half-packed apartment, the life he'd been preparing to abandon, and made his choice. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Dave called after him. "To fight for the woman I love," Michael said over his shoulder, "and to grovel for forgiveness from the woman who's become my whole world." As the door closed behind him, Dave sank back onto the couch, hoping he'd made the right choice, and praying that his daughter would finally find the happiness she deserved. The drive to the Adirondacks usually took 5 hours. Michael made it in 4, his BMW eating up the miles as urgency drove him forward. He tried calling Emma's cell phone repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. By the time he reached the lake house, the sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Emma's Honda Civic sat in the driveway, suitcases visible through the rear window. She was really leaving, ready to start over without him. Michael knocked on the front door, his heart hammering against his ribs. No answer. He walked around to the back deck, where he found Emma sitting at the edge of the dock, her feet dangling in the water. She didn't turn when his footsteps approached, but her spine straightened, aware of his presence. "Emma, go away, Michael." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Whatever my father sent you to say, I don't want to hear it." "He didn't send me," Michael said softly. "I came because I need to talk to you before you leave for Chicago." Emma finally turned and Michael's breath caught. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. But there was a new maturity in her expression, a weariness that hadn't been there before. "There's nothing to talk about," she said. "You made your choice that day in your office. You chose my father's approval over what we had." Michael sat beside her on the dock, careful to leave some distance. "You're right," he said quietly. "I did choose, and I chose wrong. So why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. Because I realized that losing your father's friendship would be painful, Michael said, his voice cracking. But losing you would destroy me. Because I've spent 10 days feeling like half my soul was ripped away. Because I love you, Emma. And I should have fought for you that day instead of letting fear make my decisions. Emma stared out at the water, her expression unreadable. Do you have any idea what it felt like, watching you stand there saying nothing while my father accused you of manipulating me? Of using me for some ego boost? Emma, I trusted you with my heart, Michael. With my body. With my dreams about our future. And when it mattered most, you let me believe that maybe he was right, that maybe I was just a naive kid with a crush. The pain in her voice cut through him like a blade. You were never that, Michael said, his voice raw. You're the strongest, most brilliant woman I've ever known. You made me believe in possibility again. Then why didn't you say that when it counted? Michael was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Because I was scared. Because I'd convinced myself that loving you was selfish, that I was robbing you of experiences you should have with someone your own age. Because your father's accusations hid every insecurity I'd been trying to ignore. Emma finally looked at him, and he saw the tears she'd been fighting back. What's changed, Michael? What makes you think any of this is different now? What's changed, he said, his voice steadying, is that I realized I'd rather fight the whole world for the right to love you than spend another day without you. What's changed is that I finally understand. Trying to protect you from potential future pain by causing you certain pain now is the cruelest kind of love. And my father? She asked softly. Your father came to see me, Michael said. He gave us his blessing. Said he'd rather see you taking risks and living fully than playing it safe and being miserable. Emma's composure broke. He said that? He did, Michael nodded. He also said he's never seen me look at anyone the way I look at you, and that includes Sarah. Michael moved closer, encouraged by the flicker of hope in her eyes. Emma, I know I hurt you. I know I failed you when you needed me to be strong. But if you'll just give me another chance, Michael, stop. He froze, heart sinking. But then she continued, her voice softer. You hurt me, yes. But I also understand why you did it. The pressure my father put on you, the impossible position he forced you into. I've been angry, but I haven't been blind. So, where does that leave us? He asked quietly. Emma stood, wrapping her arms around herself as she walked to the end of the dock. I don't know. The past 10 days have been the longest of my life, but they've also given me time to think about what I want, about what I'm willing to fight for. Michael joined her, standing close enough to feel her warmth but respecting her space. And what did you decide? That I love you, Emma said simply. Not because you're older or sophisticated, not because you're successful or talented, but because you see me, really see me, not just the potential version of who I might become someday. Michael's breath hitched. Emma. But I also decided, she went on, that I won't be with someone who can't fight for us when things get difficult. I won't love someone who runs away when the world disapproves. The challenge in her voice was clear. Michael met it head on. Then it's good that I'm not running anymore, he said firmly. It's good that I drove 5 hours to tell you that I choose you, Emma Martinez. I choose you, over convenience, over other people's approval, over every rational argument about why we shouldn't be together. Emma turned fully toward him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of doubt. And when the next crisis comes, she asked quietly, when people whisper about our age difference, when it affects our careers, when it gets hard, then what? Michael stepped closer, his hands gently framing her face. Then we face it together, he said. No more running. No more choosing other people's comfort over our happiness. Just us fighting for what we have. Emma's resistance finally crumbled. Michael, I love you, Emma, he said softly. Not despite your age, not because of it, but because you're you. Because you challenge me, inspire me, and make me want to be better than I ever thought I could be. The kiss, when it came, tasted of tears and forgiveness and new beginnings. They held each other on the dock as the last light faded from the sky, both knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but finally ready to travel it together. So, Ma, what happens now? Emma whispered against his lips. Now we go back to Chicago, Michael said, and build the life we want. Together? Emma smiled, the first real smile she'd managed in 10 days. Together sounds perfect. As they walked back toward the house hand in hand, neither noticed Dave watching from the kitchen window, his eyes bright with unshed tears, filled with the relief of a father who had finally learned to trust his daughter's heart. 3 months later, Chicago's autumn air carried the scent of changing leaves as Emma and Michael walked hand in hand through Lincoln Park. The scandal of their relationship had rippled through their professional circles initially, but time had a way of normalizing even the most shocking developments. "The Morrison Project presentation is tomorrow," Emma said, swinging their joined hands as they walked along the tree-lined path. "Are you nervous?" Michael smiled, marveling at how natural this all felt. Discussing work, sharing daily concerns, building a life together one conversation at a time. "Not nervous," he said, excited. "Your sustainable integration concepts are going to revolutionize how they think about residential development." Emma had completed her internship with a different firm after their reunion, gaining experience while Michael tied up loose ends in Seattle. Now, 3 months after officially moving in together, they were collaborating on their first major project, a mixed-use development that combined Emma's environmental innovations with Michael's practical expertise. "I still can't believe Morrison and Klein let you out of your contract," Emma said. "They understood," Michael replied. "Sometimes you have to choose between a good opportunity and the right life." He stopped walking and turned to face her beneath a canopy of golden maple leaves. "I made the right choice." Their apartment in Lincoln Park reflected their merged lives. Emma's plants thriving alongside Michael's architectural books, her sustainable design prototypes sharing space with his professional awards. It wasn't perfect. They navigated the usual challenges of cohabitation, made more complicated by their age difference. But they were learning. Michael was discovering the joy of seeing Chicago through Emma's younger eyes. Concerts in Millennium Park, late-night food trucks, weekend festivals he'd once dismissed as too crowded or chaotic. Emma, meanwhile, found comfort in Michael's steadiness, his ability to provide perspective during stressful projects, the security of being with someone who'd already weathered life's biggest storms. The most significant healing, though, had come in their relationship with Dave. "Dad called while you were in the shower," Emma said as they entered their building. "He wants to know if we're still coming for Thanksgiving." I told him yes, assuming you're still willing to face the extended Martinez family interrogation. Michael laughed. Their last visit to the lake house had been awkward, but ultimately healing. Dave had made a real effort to welcome Michael, not just as his old friend, but as Emma's partner. The conversations had been stilted at first, but by the end of the weekend, they'd found their way back to something resembling their old dynamic. "Your cousins can't be worse than the Chicago architecture community gossip mill," Michael said, unlocking the apartment door. Inside, Emma headed for the kitchen while Michael checked his messages. Their domestic rhythm felt natural now, Emma cooking while Michael handled correspondence, then coming together over dinner to share their day. "Michael!" Emma called from the kitchen, her voice carrying an odd note. "What is it?" She appeared in the doorway holding an official-looking envelope. "This came for you today, from the American Institute of Architects." Michael's heartbeat quickened as he tore open the letter and scanned it quickly. "Holy, what?" Emma demanded. "I've been nominated for the gold medal for sustainable residential design." He looked up at her in disbelief. This is the highest honor in American architecture." Emma launched herself into his arms, laughing as they spun together in the living room. The nomination was more than a professional milestone. It was vindication for both of them, proof that their partnership, personal and professional, was something extraordinary. "We have to celebrate," Emma declared. "Dinner somewhere expensive and impractical." "Actually," Michael said, his tone softening, "there's something else we need to discuss first." Emma's smile faltered. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous," he said gently. "Important." He led her to the couch and took her hands in his. "Emma, these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. Not just because of the work we're doing, but because of the life we're building." "Michael, what are you—" "I know we said we'd take things slow, figure out the future as we went," he continued. "But I also know that I don't want to figure it out with anyone else." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we're unconventional. I know people will say we're moving too fast, that we should wait." "Michael," her voice was barely a whisper, "but I also know that I love you completely, that you've made me believe in forever again." And I want to spend whatever time I have left on this earth making you as happy as you've made me. He opened the box, revealing a vintage engagement ring, an emerald-cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones. Emma Martinez, he said softly, will you marry me? Emma stared at the ring, then at Michael's earnest face, then back at the ring. The silence stretched until Michael began to panic. If it's too soon, we can wait. If you need time to— Yes, Emma blurted. Then again, louder. Yes, yes, obviously, yes. Michael's relief was audible as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the vintage setting complementing Emma's artistic sensibilities. It was Sarah's grandmother's ring, Michael said quietly. Sarah always said she hoped someday it would go to someone who understood that love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other every day, despite the challenges. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Michael, I can't, this is too much. This belonged to Sarah, and Sarah would want it to belong to you now, he said. She'd want me to be happy. She'd want us both to be happy. They held each other close on the couch, the weight of commitment wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Outside, Chicago hummed with evening life, but inside their apartment, time seemed to pause, suspended in possibility. What do we tell people? Emma asked eventually. About the timeline? About us moving so fast? Michael kissed her forehead. We tell them the truth. That sometimes love doesn't follow conventional schedules or social expectations. Sometimes you meet the person who changes everything, and you have to be brave enough to follow where that leads. Emma smiled, admiring the ring on her finger. How long do we have to wait before we can start planning? How long do you want to wait? About 5 minutes, she admitted, making him laugh. Then we'll plan the wedding of your dreams, Ms. Martinez, he said, grinning. Something that reflects who we are, together. As they began discussing venues, guest lists, and all the joyful chaos of building a future together, neither noticed the soft chime of Michael's phone announcing a new text from Dave. Congratulations. I couldn't be happier for you both. The engagement announcement in the Chicago Tribune's architecture section triggered a media frenzy neither of them had anticipated. Prominent architect, 42, engaged to former intern, 23. The headline exploded across social media, spawning 1,000 think pieces about workplace relationships, age gaps, and power dynamics. Maybe we should have eloped, Emma muttered, scrolling through yet another article dissecting their relationship while eating breakfast at the kitchen island. Michael looked up from his own tablet, where similar headlines filled the screen. Second thoughts about the publicity? Yes, she sighed. About you? Never. The media attention intensified after photos surfaced from a gallery opening they'd attended the week before, Michael's hand resting lightly on Emma's back as they viewed exhibits on sustainable architecture, both of them looking relaxed and genuinely happy. The images ignited endless debates online about professionalism, ethics, and age differences. Morrison and Klein's PR department called, Michael said carefully. They're concerned about how the negative coverage might affect the Lincoln Park project. Emma set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. What kind of concerns? The kind that includes phrases like image management and public perception, Michael replied grimly. They're suggesting I step back from the public-facing aspects of the project until the controversy dies down. That's ridiculous, Emma said sharply. You're the lead architect. Your reputation is impeccable. Was impeccable, Michael corrected quietly. Apparently, dating someone 20 years younger raises questions about my judgment in all areas. Emma stood abruptly, pacing the living room. This is exactly what my father worried about. Not that you'd hurt me, but that being with you would damage my career before it even started. Emma, no, listen, she cut him off. I've had 3 potential employers cancel interviews this week. 3, Michael. They're not saying it's because of the publicity, but the timing? It's awfully coincidental. Michael felt guilt clawing at his chest. Maybe we should postpone the wedding. Let things cool down. Emma stopped pacing, turning to face him, fire in her eyes. Don't you dare. Don't you dare let these small-minded people make decisions about our life. But if it's affecting your career, then I'll build a different career, she said fiercely. One where being in love with you isn't considered a professional liability. The conviction in her voice reminded Michael exactly why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Emma's courage, her defiance in the face of judgment, her refusal to— Compromise had never been part of Emma's nature. It was one of the things that drew Michael to her from the start, her refusal to bend her values even when it would have made her life easier. "There's something else," Michael said reluctantly. Dave called. He's been getting questions from reporters, trying to confirm details about how we met, when the relationship started. Emma sank down beside him on the couch, the tension visible in the way her hands twisted together. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests someone's been spreading rumors about inappropriate conduct during your internship." They sat in heavy silence, the weight of judgment pressing against the fragile happiness they'd worked so hard to rebuild. This was the test Emma had warned him about, the moment when their love would face the world's scrutiny. "I have an idea," she said suddenly. "I'm listening." "What if we tell our story ourselves, on our own terms, with our own narrative?" Michael lifted an eyebrow. "You want to do interviews?" "I want to do one interview," she clarified, her tone steady. "With someone who'll let us explain that what we have is real, that it developed naturally, that we're both consenting adults who chose each other despite the complications." "And you think that will help?" Emma turned toward him, meeting his eyes squarely. "I think hiding makes us look guilty. I think letting other people define our relationship gives them power over our happiness. And I think if we're brave enough to love each other publicly, some of this criticism will lose its sting." Michael considered her words. It was risky. Opening their private life to public scrutiny could easily backfire. But she was right about one thing. Silence only allowed others to control their story. "Okay," he said at last. "But we do it together, and we tell the truth. All of it." "All of it," Emma repeated, nodding firmly. "How we met, how the relationship developed, why we chose each other despite the challenges. No sanitized version, no apologetic explanations. Just the truth about two people who fell in love." Michael exhaled slowly. Emma smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her in days. "The truth sounds perfect." 2 days later, they sat across from Jennifer Walsh, the Chicago Tribune's lifestyle editor, at a cozy coffee shop in Lincoln Park. Jennifer was known for her fairness, her ability to handle sensitive topics without turning them into scandal, and she'd agreed to let Michael and Emma speak without judgment. "So," Jennifer began, setting her recorder between them, "let's start at the beginning. How did this relationship actually develop?" Emma and Michael exchanged a glance, drawing strength from each other before diving into their story. They spoke of grief and healing, of professional respect growing into personal connection, of the careful, deliberate choices they'd made to handle the complications honestly. "The age difference is obviously a significant factor," Jennifer said at one point. "How do you address critics who say it creates an inherent power imbalance?" "By pointing out that Emma has her own career, her own goals, her own income," Michael replied evenly. "She's not dependent on me, financially or professionally. She chose this relationship with full awareness of its challenges." Jennifer turned to Emma. "And what do you say to people who suggest you're too young to make this kind of commitment?" Emma's voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "I'd say that infantilizing women in their 20s does more harm than good. I graduated from one of the country's top architecture programs. I'm building my own career. I'm old enough to vote, to serve in the military, to make major life decisions. I'm certainly old enough to choose who I love." The interview lasted over an hour. They discussed their projects, their future plans, their shared goals. By the end, Jennifer was smiling. "You know," she said, clicking off the recorder, "I came into this expecting to write a cautionary tale about workplace relationships. But what I'm hearing is a love story. Between two people at different life stages, maybe, but a genuine one."
"That's exactly what it is," Emma said softly, reaching for Michael's hand.
When the article appeared that Sunday, it painted them as a thoughtful, mature couple who'd faced unconventional circumstances with integrity and respect. The headline read, "Love and Architecture: How Two Chicago Designers Built Something Beautiful Together." The public response was overwhelmingly positive. Michael's phone buzzed nonstop with congratulatory messages from colleagues, and Emma received 3 new interview requests from firms interested in her sustainable design work. "Think it worked?" Emma asked, scrolling through social media comments that, for once, weren't vicious. "I think," Michael said, pulling her into his arms, "that sometimes the truth really is the best defense." That evening, they toasted with champagne on their apartment balcony, watching the sun sink over the skyline. For the first time in weeks, peace felt possible. They'd faced the world and survived. Now they just had to plan their wedding. 2 weeks before the ceremony, everything fell apart. It began with a phone call. Emma was in the shower, humming, getting ready for their final walkthrough at the Napa Valley Winery, where they planned to exchange vows. Michael answered his phone distractedly. Michael Harper. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. This is Janet Reeves from the State Board of Architectural Licensing. We've received a formal complaint regarding your professional conduct that requires immediate investigation. Michael's blood went cold. What kind of complaint? Allegations of inappropriate workplace relationships and potential licensing violations related to supervision of unlicensed personnel, she said. I'm afraid we'll need to schedule a formal hearing. The call lasted 5 minutes, but it was enough to shatter everything they'd rebuilt since the Tribune article. When Emma came out of the bathroom, towel around her hair, she found Michael sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. What's wrong? She asked, instantly alert. He told her about the call, about the complaint, about what it could mean. She listened, the color draining from her face. This is about us, Emma said finally, her voice quiet but certain. Someone's using our relationship to attack your career. It's not just my career, Michael said. If they find anything that suggests impropriety during your internship, even if nothing happened, it could affect you too. Your licensing, your reputation, everything you've worked for. Emma sat beside him, her hands trembling. What do we do? I don't know, he admitted. My lawyer says the investigation could take months. The venue's asking for final payment, and I can't... He looked away. I can't ask you to marry someone who might lose everything. Emma's tone sharpened. Don't you dare make this decision for me! Emma, be realistic. If I lose my license, if my name gets dragged through the mud, what kind of life can I offer you? You're 23 with endless potential. You shouldn't tie yourself to someone whose career might be over. My career might be over too, she snapped, jumping to her feet. Don't you see? They're not just attacking you, Michael. They're sending a message to any woman who dares to love someone the world doesn't approve of. Which is exactly why we should postpone. No, her voice cut through his like a blade. No, I won't let them win. I won't let fear make our choices again. But Michael's face was already closing off, retreating into that quiet, guarded place she recognized too well, the same look he'd worn after Dave's confrontation months ago. Emma, you need to think about your future. You are my future, she cried. Why don't you understand that? Why do you keep trying to protect me from choices I'm capable of making myself? Because I love you too much, he said, his voice breaking, to let you sacrifice everything for me. And I love you too much, she shot back, to abandon you when things get hard. They stood there, breathing heavily, the air between them thick with hurt and fear. I'm calling the venue, Michael said at last, his tone final. We're postponing the wedding. Michael, please. This isn't a discussion, Emma. I won't let you ruin your life for me. Emma stood frozen as he walked out of the bedroom, and something inside her broke. Not from doubt in their love, but from the knowledge that love alone might not be enough to save them this time. This wasn't heartbreak. Emma had survived heartbreak before. What she felt now was something different. The breaking of patience, of the willingness to let other people's fears dictate her choices. She followed Michael into the living room, where he was already dialing the winery's number.
Hang up the phone, Michael.
Emma, hang up the phone or I'll walk out of this apartment and not come back. Michael's finger hovered over the call button. You don't mean that. Try me, she said quietly. I've spent my entire life being careful, being responsible, making choices based on what other people thought was best for me. I won't do it anymore, not even for you. The ultimatum hung between them like a live wire. Michael could see the determination in Emma's eyes, the same steel that had drawn him to her from the beginning. But he could also see the cost, the way this fight was aging her, the faint lines of stress that had appeared around her eyes since the investigation began. You don't understand the reality of this situation, he said softly.
I understand that you're letting fear win again, Emma replied.
You're making the same choice you made in your office that day, protecting everyone except the woman you claim to love. The accusation hit its target. Michael flinched as if she'd slapped him. That's not fair, isn't it? She pressed. You're doing exactly what you did before, deciding what I can and can't handle, making choices about my life without including me in the decision. Michael set the phone down, defeat evident in every line of his body. So what do you want me to do, Emma? Ignore the investigation? Pretend this won't affect you? I want you to fight, she said. I want you to remember that we're stronger together than apart. I want you to have enough faith in what we've built to believe it can survive this challenge. And if it can't? If I lose everything and drag you down with me? Emma crossed the room and stood in front of him, her hands framing his face with gentle determination. Then we'll build something new together. But we build it as partners, Michael, as equals who face the world side by side, not as protector and protected. Michael closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I'm scared, Emma, not of losing my career, but of being responsible for destroying yours. And I'm scared too, she admitted. But I'm more scared of losing you to fear than I am of facing whatever comes next. They stood there in the living room, holding each other as the weight of their decision settled around them. Outside, Chicago hummed with evening activity, indifferent to the quiet crisis unfolding in their apartment. So, Michael said finally, we go to Napa. Emma nodded, her voice soft. Finally. We get married, surrounded by the people who love us, and we face whatever comes next as husband and wife. Her smile was radiant with relief. Together, she said. Together, Michael echoed, finally understanding that protecting Emma meant trusting her strength, not shielding her from life's complications. When he picked up the phone again, it wasn't to cancel the wedding. It was to confirm it. Both of them knew in that moment they'd just passed their biggest test. Love, they realized, wasn't about avoiding challenges, it was about facing them together. 6 months later, on a perfect May morning in Napa Valley, Emma Martinez walked down an aisle lined with lavender and olive trees toward the man who had taught her that love was worth fighting for. The investigation had been dropped after Michael's lawyer proved the complaint came from a competitor with questionable motives. The Professional Licensing Board found no evidence of misconduct, and ironically, the publicity had brought Michael and Emma more business than they could handle. Their collaborative approach to sustainable residential design had become a model for other firms. But none of that mattered as much as this moment. Emma wore her grandmother's restored wedding dress. Michael stood waiting in a charcoal suit that brought out the color of his eyes. Around them gathered everyone who mattered most. Dave walked beside his daughter, his face glowing with pride and the quiet peace of a man who'd learned to trust his child's judgment. Sarah's parents sat in the front row, insisting that Michael's new happiness honored their daughter's memory rather than diminished it. Michael's Chicago colleagues mingled with Emma's Yale classmates, all of them celebrating a love that had defied expectations and survived every test. You look beautiful, Dave whispered as they reached the altar where Michael waited. I look happy, Emma corrected, her eyes never leaving Michael's face. That too, Dave said with a smile. He kissed his daughter's cheek before placing her hand in Michael's. Take care of each other. The ceremony was simple but profound, their vows written by hand and spoken with voices that carried across the vineyard. Emma, Michael began, his voice steady despite the emotion brimming in his eyes. You taught me that love doesn't follow rules or timelines. You showed me that strength comes from vulnerability, that wisdom isn't about age but about being brave enough to choose happiness, despite uncertainty. I promise to be your partner, not your protector, to trust your decisions, support your dreams, and love you fiercely for all the days of my life. Emma's response came without hesitation. Michael, you saw me before I fully saw myself. You believed in my potential when I was still discovering what I was capable of. You taught me that love means choosing someone every day, especially when the world tries to convince you it's wrong. I promise to stand beside you through every challenge, to build a life that honors both our dreams and to love you completely for however long we have together. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss tasted of joy and tears and the promise of everything still to come. The reception unfolded under string lights and stars, filled with laughter and speeches that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Dave raised his glass, his voice thick with emotion. To Michael and Emma, he said, who taught me that sometimes the best way to protect someone you love is to trust them to choose their own path to happiness. Rachel Chen, now Michael's business partner, offered her own toast. To the couple who proved that the best architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about constructing a life together that can weather any storm. Later, as the evening wound down, Michael and Emma found themselves alone on the winery's veranda, swaying to soft music drifting from the reception still going strong behind them. "Any regrets, Mrs. Harper?" Michael asked, spinning her gently under the California stars. "Only that we waited so long to stop caring what everyone else thought," Emma said, grinning. "Though I do love how that sounds, Mrs. Harper." "Good," he said, pulling her close. "Because I plan to spend the next 50 years making sure you never regret saying yes." Emma leaned back to study his face in the moonlight. 50 years? That's all you're committing to?" Michael smiled. "Well, we can renegotiate after the first 50. They danced in easy silence, marveling at how far they'd come since that stormy night in Chicago when they first admitted their feelings. The challenges hadn't disappeared. There would always be people who questioned their relationship, professional obstacles to navigate, the normal complexities of building a life together. But they'd learned that love wasn't about avoiding difficulties. It was about facing them as partners, as equals, as two people who'd chosen each other despite every rational reason not to. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, noticing Emma's thoughtful look. "About that girl who graduated from Yale a year ago, so sure she had her whole life planned out," Emma said softly. "About how sometimes the most beautiful things happen when you're brave enough to let your plans change. And about how lucky I am that you were brave enough to love me back." Michael stopped dancing, his hands framing her face with the same tenderness he'd shown the night she first told him she loved him. "Emma Harper," he said solemnly, "you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. The absolute best thing." Their final kiss as newlyweds was witnessed only by the stars and the rolling hills of wine country, a perfect ending to their beginning. As they walked back toward the reception, hand in hand and hearts full of promise, both knew their greatest adventure wasn't behind them. It was just beginning. They had built something beautiful together, something strong enough to last a lifetime. Proof that love truly can conquer all when two people are brave enough to fight for it. Together, they stepped back into the light and laughter of their wedding celebration, ready to face whatever came next as husband and wife, as partners, as soulmates who had found each other across the years and chosen to build forever together.